What's curious about the Assange situation is that when he was leaking things that were anti-Bush, anti-W, then he was a good guy. He was a darling to the media. And when he was honest about other things, like the problems in the Democratic establishment, and we had this whole fiasco the last few years of the collusion and all of that collapsing, Vault 7. That was the big issue. Vault 7 showed the ability to spoof things on the part of the CIA. And that's when he became an enemy of the mainstream left media, was when he leaked, right? WikiLeaks gets information. There's no proof, no evidence that this was from Russian hackers. This is from the Russian hack with WikiLeaks. We get Jay Dyer send email to Democrat didn't connect to WikiLeaks. This is literally the kind of crap that people were saying. So when it comes to Assange, I think it was wrong. I think that he was serious. And the fact that he's now being arrested, the fact that the whole establishment is not backing him up, even though obviously the WikiLeaks that relate to the emails, Clinton emails, they obviously helped Trump, and Trump has surprisingly said, I don't know who that is. Who's Julian Assange? Never heard. I don't know who it is.
WikiLeaks. I love WikiLeaks.
We've learned so much from WikiLeaks.
Oh, we love WikiLeaks. Boy, they have really WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks.
WikiLeaks. I mean, this WikiLeaks is fascinating.
The WikiLeaks revelations. This WikiLeaks is like a treasure trove.
Do you still love WikiLeaks?
I know nothing about WikiLeaks. It's not my thing. I know nothing really about them. It's not my deal in life.
Which is obviously not true. Of course, he knows who Julian Assange is. He knows what WikiLeaks is. I haven't heard of it. Trump kind of does this, I think, when anything controversial comes up. He says, I've never heard of it. This is obviously not true. Of course he knows who Julian Assange is. Of course he's familiar with WikiLeaks and the Clinton email scenario. How many times did Trump talk about your emails? Where are your emails? What happened was the Vault 7 was the key thing that turned the fake left establishment against him, when previously the fake right establishment was against him. And so now the fake left and the fake right, and even Trump and company who benefited from the leaks, since they see that it's a hot button issue, there's nobody that's going to be on Julian Assange's side here. When it's just the CIA and big tech and these agencies are able to spoof all this stuff. And it became very evident with Vault 7. And again, that was the key issue that made Assange no longer favorable to the fake right or to the fake left. And that's, I think, why he's being arrested. Now, I do think Assange has tried to expose things. And what does it demonstrate here? Well, on the one hand, yes, it demonstrates the death of the fourth estate and the media keeping everybody honest, which we've kind of figured out really died a long time ago. You know, the richest families in America essentially owned all of the top media companies 100 years ago. So only a person who really bought into the Enlightenment perspective that there is really neutrality and that we can all just be unbiased and this kind of stuff, that's really the only people who would think that the fourth estate really function in that way. And to a degree, yes, there have been time periods and decades where journalists have really exposed stories, where there really were people calling out the establishment. But it's always within a very narrow paradigm. It's always within a paradigm which is not ever going to really shake up or change the system. Now, I don't think necessarily that Assange was literally going to shake up the system and all this kind of stuff. But I do think that the leaks, because they were legitimate in regard to Vault 7, or if you look at something like the integrity leaks, they really do show how the system works. And that's what makes those leaks particularly dangerous. And then I realized too, well, you could say, well, what about the fact that Assange never went into the big event from the year 2000 plus one? He never explained that event, and he always shied away from it. And I always thought, well, that made him a little bit dubious. But actually, when you think about it from a tactical perspective, now I understand why he didn't go into that, because he knew, I think, that any talk of that kind of a nature, of any of that kind of a subject matter in a significant way, in a real analytical way, would skew the perception of Assange. It would completely destroy his perception. So he's being, I think, kind of thrown under the bus here. which I think is unfortunate. I saw him one of the things that I would criticize him for was he was pandering to these really degenerate leftist people like Peter Singer, right, who calls for heavy petting with your pets and other such nastiness. But I think the reason he was doing that was that he was trying to gain left appeal. So he was reaching out to perceived liberal figureheads, moral philosophers, more like immoral degenerates. And I think that was a big mistake, because you can't really, if you're going to play the game of conservative versus liberal, you kind of have to be consistent with it. You can't constantly attack both sides and then appeal to both sides. And I think that he was still trying to play between the false idea of neutrality, of a real position between right and left. And you really can't do that, because if you anger both of those administrations, really what you're the left and the right, the Democrat, the Republican, what you're angering is the power that sits above both of those groups. And so then what happens is that Assange, I think, finds himself kind of just having to appeal to the mass audience, but the internet is structured such that they can now shut down appeals to masses and to a broader spectrum beyond a two-party duopoly in a controlled structure like that. So it is unfortunate, and what it signifies, I think, is really not just the death of Fourth Estate, 1980s New York Times, Boston Globe style media. It signifies the death of the power and ability of the leak engine to do a whole lot. I mean, it can be a targeted thing, a limited hangout thing. I'm not saying that Julian himself was a limited hangout, but I think WikiLeaks ultimately shows itself to be ineffectual in what it attempts to do. It is doing the work of what journalism used to do. But unfortunately, in the postmodern era, journalism doesn't matter. And journalism hasn't mattered for a long time, because journalism is predicated on reality not being perceived in the postmodern way. It's predicated on reality being perceived by the masses as a logical, rational, reasonable, empirical thing. And in a sense, it is that. But when most people don't perceive it that way, it no longer functions. And let's hope that there will be some actual justice for Assange, because he certainly doesn't deserve to be thrown away into a prison. He looked kind of like an Amish, Julian Assange, when he comes out of his hole there, kind of a Unabomber type of look. So hopefully he's not going to have to be confined to something like solitary confinement or the death penalty. So we can hope that there will be justice in this regard. But I don't know, we'll have to wait and see. I think it signifies that we most definitely live in a totally postmodern period.
Look at the situation now where the deep state is just totally above the law, totally unaccountable, and totally working against our own interests, the interests of the people. And then I have to say there's a little bit of a gray area. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. At this stage in the game, in 2019, who is a bigger threat to order in the world, order in our society? Is it the CIA, the Pentagon, the Defense Department, the State Department, really the entire U.S. government, or is it whistleblowers, or is it people like Julian Assange? I would have to probably say it's the government. You know, if we're going to choose sides here, and that's what it comes down to fundamentally, is making decisions. Who is the bigger threat? Well, what is the better alternative here? Would we rather live in a world where the government can keep everything secret and we don't know anything that's going on, or we have whistleblowers? I kind of sympathize with Julian Assange. These are desperate times. I think the state more or less acts as our enemy, and they facilitate certain things in the Middle East, certain things in our own country. So some of the problems with the right-wing argument is, what exactly are we trying to defend? What kind of order are we trying to shore up? You know, I see a lot of people on Fox, I see a lot of Republicans that are very draconian about Julian Assange. We got to put him in jail and throw away the key and torture him. He's an enemy of the state. Well, I don't know. Are we really friends of the state? I don't really feel like a friend of the state, I have to tell you. I don't feel like the government's my friend, you know, with how they spy on Americans, the people they bring into this country, the terror that they visit upon this country, and you can read into that what you will. So that's sort of my position on the right-wing take. On the left-wing take, you know, here's another thing where there are problems with the left, where they say, well, he's a freedom fighter, and he's a journalist. It's kind of gotten to the point where it's not like it's really in the public interest if we're covering up things with the Iraq war and things going on in Yemen and war crimes and deceit at the highest level, collusion between two parties. At that point, you probably are a journalist. I think at that point, you probably are doing better work as a whistleblower than as a conventional journalist. But near now, you've got, kind of a real ballsy guy. This isn't somebody that's writing about how Kamala Harris likes A Tribe Called Quest, and isn't that so hilarious, and all this other stuff. Here's somebody who's actually going toe-to-toe with the U.S. government, going right up against it. He's, they're like on the verge of drone striking this guy, right? And they're starving him, and they're using like psychological warfare. He's basically in jail in this Ecuadorian embassy for 7 years, and he needs medical treatment and so on. Who is really telling the truth here? I think somebody like Julian Assange kind of shows the world the funny side, right? Kind of shows us who the liars are, who the frauds are. Now, again, as a rule, not everybody can be like this. I think you can only have one Julian Assange. And in that way, he's sort of a tragic hero. I think that's the way we have to look at him. Here is somebody who did what he had to do. He knew the consequences. He knew what he was doing. And now he's going to face jail time. And I think we can at once understand that what he did was good. And ultimately, he's our ally, because it is tough. On the one hand, we do want to know what's going on. The government is hurting the people and abusing their power and lying to the people. So that's kind of how I view Julian Assange, sort of as a vigilante, a tragic hero, one of these Watchmen type characters who he accepted what he had to do. He was probably the only one who could have done it. And he did it to the benefit of mankind, and now he'll probably just have to face the consequence. Now, I don't see how he gets out of this one. I will say, though, it really does sort of irk me the way Donald Trump responded to this.
I suspect that he is going to be asked about the provenance of these Democratic documents which he released. And I suspect that this information could be very embarrassing to the Democratic Party. There's been rumors for years that he has an insurance policy of documents to be released when he is arrested. Well, I suppose we'll find out very quickly whether that's true or not. And given the level of corruption that we can guess about in the Obama administration, the Hillary campaign, the Democratic Party, he might have some very interesting things to reveal.
Or is he shutting up because he's letting Julian Assange down? I hope that he's not letting him down.
Well, now we literally have the government pretending that conspiracies are ridiculous and fake, charging a man with conspiracy. Not that that's a common practice, as I've continued to point out. People are charged with conspiracy in this country all the time. But let's reflect on how absurd it is for them to just blanket say that conspiracy videos are going to be deranked, delisted, not recommended, while we're literally staring at this in the face. This is when you recognize their propaganda coming face to face with the reality in the world, that there is conspiracy, but they don't want you to think about it like that.
What did he do? Tell the truth? Well, that's a crime. All the things that were allegedly classified that Private Manning leaked to WikiLeaks that they published, none of them were about national security or methods and means of spying or anything like that. It was just, yeah, we kill civilians in Iraq. It was a lot of stuff that everyone knew anyway. I mean, who was under the delusion that we didn't kill civilians in Iraq, right? Who was under the impression that, yeah, we don't torture. We just, yell at them with dogs and stuff. But there was one big one, and that was what Seth Rich, in my opinion, leaked, not the Russians, to Julian Assange about Hillary Clinton and her mails. And instead of asking, well, then who leaked to WikiLeaks if it wasn't Russia, because they've absolved Trump from Russiagate, then where did the leak come from? No, they went and rounded up Assange as soon as possible, and now he'll be in the brig. And I want to say one more thing on that. They already agreed not to extradite him to any country with the death penalty, which would include the United States, which is who wants him. However, the charges against him would not warrant the death penalty, so that could be a ploy where he gets shipped to the United States because it's not a death penalty offense. But then once he's in the United States, they just pile on new charges, and then he's, up the chair. So
Yeah.
I hope not.